how we wish that, how glad we will be rather when this whole coronavirus COVID-19 situation is over with, and how glad we'll be when there's a vaccine. Well, we've got a vaccine now, and people don't want to take it for whatever reason. So, folks, please, if you haven't been vaccinated already, please get the vaccine. And this was brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station, No Static Radio, where we don't bring the static, but we sure enough bring the noise, powered by Google. Secondly, if you are in the Cleveland area or Northeast Ohio on the first or third Saturday of each month, there's some great things going on. Well, actually, there's some great things going on in this area year round, but I just want to highlight this here. On the first and third Saturday of each month at 6812 Woodland Avenue at Williams Temple Church of God in Christ, guess what's going on there, folks, between the hours of 11 a.m. and 2 p.m.? They are giving away free groceries each week. But not only that, and listen, before I get on to what else they're doing, you know what's great about it? You do not have to show proof of residence. You do not have to show proof of income. You do not have to show anything. Well, that's not entirely correct. There's one thing you do have to show, and that is you have to show up, in that you have to come there to receive this. But you know what? Not only are you going to get the free groceries, but you are also going to get free clothing, not just for adults, but for children as well. Now, that would be great, folks, if it just stopped there. If it just stopped with you getting free groceries and free clothing for you and your children, that would be great. You know, praise the Lord, and a great job by them. But no, there's more to it than that, because listen, between the hours of 11:30 and 1:30, they are giving away a free hot lunch. That's right, a free hot lunch. And listen, this is being prepared by church folks, so you know it's going to be good. And so if you're in the Cleveland area on the first or third Saturday of each month, please take advantage of that at 6812 Woodland Avenue, housed at Williams Temple Church of God in Christ, but also in conjunction with the Greater Cleveland Food Bank and also various other ministries throughout Cleveland and the Northeast Ohio area. Well, for those of you that are new to this show, this is how we do it. I give my take. Well, first of all, we talk sports and we talk politics and we talk the issues of the day. I give my take on those topics. I throw those topics out, give my take on it, and then we invite you to call in with yours at 216-939-5087, 216-939-5087. Now, you do not have to agree with me at all times. That's fine. That makes for spirited debate. But we just ask that your take be on topic, that it be concise, and that it makes sense. And oh, by the way, one other thing I want to slip in here too. There is an excellent book out right now called You're Worth It. And it's by Yantina Monique, who was a guest on our show back on August the 8th. Excellent book called Worth It. And exactly that's what it is. And it's geared to people who are 15 to 100. If you want to know how you can get that book, you can hit her up on her Facebook page at Yantina Monique. You can get it in bookstores and also online. So please take advantage of that. It's an excellent book, and you'll be the better for it, I promise you, after you've read it. So this is what we want to talk about today. I'm throwing these topics out, and as I said, we invite you to call in with your take on these topics at 216-939-5087, 216-939-5087. First, we're going to talk about the infrastructure dilemma that's going on right now on Capitol Hill. We're calling that the Democratic dilemma and the infrastructure, and we're going to look at that and what's going on with it right now. There's yet to be a vote taken on it. The Senate and the House have gone home for the weekend. There was no vote. There was supposed to be a vote on Thursday, but that was postponed. And then yesterday it was postponed as well by Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. So we're going to be looking at that from various angles. Also, too, with the start of the NBA season just a few weeks away, there's been a lot of talk in the media this week about star players in the NBA who have, for whatever reason, refused to get the vaccine and the consequences that is going to have not only on them personally, but also on their teams that they play for as well. We're also going to be looking at corruption in government, especially in local government here in Cleveland and Northeast Ohio. But we know that it's not just unique to this area as well. So we're going to be doing an overview on that. And we're also going to give our NFL picks for this week of week 4. As you know, if you're a regular listener to this show, we don't do every game. We just highlight the games that we think are important, give our picks on them. And as I tell you each week, this is for entertainment purposes only. Do not go out and bet the house on it, because if you lose your house because you bet the way that I picked the game, then don't come looking for me. These are for entertainment purposes only, okay? So, and take it as that. And then finally, as we do each week, we close our show with our hero and our zero of the week. We are capably and ably and dynamically assisted today by our producer and producer extraordinaire. DJ Ism is in the house today. Ism, give him a shout out today. Yes, we're so glad to have him with us today.
In the building.
He's in the building. He's in the building. He's going to be taking your calls, and he's running everything else here too. So shout out to him, because listen, if he wasn't here right now, guess who wouldn't be on the air right now? That's me, because I don't know anything about running it. So I'm desperately depending on him today, and he does an excellent job each week. So
thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. No problem at all. So the call-in number, as we said, is 216-939-5087. Now let's get right to it. So over this past week, there's been a lot of debate back and forth about the infrastructure bill that's before the House and the Senate. Now, there's two parts to it. There is the infrastructure bill that's $1.5 trillion. All right. And this infrastructure bill, we have a caller. Caller, welcome to the right side. Caller, state your name and where you're calling from.
Good afternoon, Jeffrey Doggett. My name is Alan Bridges, and I'm calling from Cleveland, Ohio, the Lee Harvard area.
Good afternoon, Alan. Yeah, my neighborhood I grew up in, and still have relatives still in the Lee Harvard area. What's on your mind today?
Well, you mentioned several topics. Let's talk about the local politics in Cleveland.
Okay, that's one that I wanted to get to, especially as it deals with corruption in it. But go ahead, the floor is yours.
Well, not necessarily corruption. We can touch on that if you want, Jeff.
Okay.
Or Jeff, excuse me. I think one of the most important things that's going on in Cleveland today is the lack of voter participation.
Yes.
And one of the things that concerns me, not only as a resident and an active voter, but the involvement of, or the way that politics is conducted in Cleveland. I think what we have going on now is more so involved with the voters. You have apathy and fear in the electorate right now. And more so, we have I'll be very candid, we have some individuals who are running for office or who are in office, so as incumbents, who just don't know how to tell the truth. And quite plainly, that makes them liars. And that discourages voters from participating.
So, and I agree with you that we do have corrupt officials here, not only, all across the board, but especially specifically want to deal right here within the city of Cleveland, especially within our council chambers locally here within the city. So, Mr. Bridges, let me just ask this question, but before I ask this question, let me just put this information out here since you're talking about voting. Those of you that are in Cleveland and Cuyahoga County, the last day for you to register to vote in the November election is October the 4th. All right. So, and if you have any change of address, if your address has changed or what have you since the last time you voted, October the 4th is also that deadline that you have to let the Board of Elections know. And if you're not yet registered, you have until October the 4th to do so. And then October the 5th begins early voting for the general election in November. So, Mr. Bridges, let me just ask you this question so we can be very frank here. You, correct me if I'm wrong, you were a candidate for council in the recent primary election in Ward 1. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
And so the top two vote getters, just for informational purposes for our audience, the top two vote getters in that election
Were to present Joe Jones, Kimberly Brown, Mark Fauci, and myself.
Okay.
And one of the things that I learned involved in this process, candidate, is not only do you have to defeat the incumbent and any other competitors, you also have to defeat the party structure. I think it's important that your listeners understand that the Democratic Party, meaning the Congress Democratic Party, if I say party for short, endorsed every incumbent across city council.
Regardless of their record, or regardless of their record and how they performed in office.
Yes, and if you break the city down into sections, as most people do, east and west, and let's call downtown the neutral zone.
Okay.
All of the east side incumbents were endorsed. If you read and listen and look at records, and there's some wards that are performing better than others, obviously. But if you look across the east side, where you have blight, crime, and minimal efforts of development, why were all those candidates, incumbents, endorsed?
That's a good question. That's a good question. Yes, why were they?
I'm sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, I was just agreeing with you. That's a good question. Why were they all endorsed? When you look at the gun violence on the east side, when you look at housing and large portions of vacant housing or large portions of housing that are inhabited and they're lead paint and the children being, getting lead paint poisoning, and so et cetera, with all the issues that are going on the east side, why would they just get blanket endorsements like that? You raised a good question there.
And I've been a lifelong Democrat. I cannot answer for the party. I would not endorse a lot of the candidates. One of the things that I do believe in, Jeff, and I think that a lot of voters might not truly understand, they have the power. An office holder is your employee. If you don't like what that employee is doing, maybe a man or a woman, the power that the voters have is to change that, not to vote for them again. More specifically, and let's talk about Ward 1.
Yes.
We have a councilman here who started out that said he did $161 million of development. Then it dropped to $160 million, I'm sorry. Then a couple weeks prior to the election, it fell to $130 million of development. If you drive around Ward 1, even if it's a $130 million of development, you should be able to see that. You don't see that in Ward 1.
No, you don't.
One of the things that, and Jeff, the example that I would share with everybody is if you want to see $130 million of development, get in your car or ride the bus, ride with somebody else, drive down Chester Avenue. As soon as you cross 105th, look to your left. I'm just you, and Cleveland Clinic is there. That's what 160 or 130 million dollars of development looks like.
Correct.
One of the things that is confusing, and I think is done with intent, is development means something new, not something old that you put on top of.
Well, Mr. Bridges, let me just hold that thought. Let me just interject here for 1 second here. For example, this is something just very simple, all right? Because I no longer live in Ward 1, but as I said in the beginning of your call, I have relatives over. My mother is still a resident of Ward 1, so I'm there literally on a daily basis, 7 days a week. All right, so something as simple as this. If you ride down East 155th Street, which is in Ward 1, folks, for those who don't know, and when you ride from 155th Street from, let's say, Glendale to Glendale to Harvard, it is literally like riding on a road that might have just recently, Air Force might have had a bombing run over, with all the holes and bumps and everything on that. And listen, and I'm not telling you anything that you don't know already, because you know, I'm just putting this out here for information for our audience. This is not a recent phenomenon. This street has been like this for ages, and there's nothing that has been done about it to improve that street. Now, we're just talking about one on the scale of things, might just be one small scale thing, but that certainly doesn't take $130 million or $160 million or however much the incumbent councilman in that ward right now says that he is used to make improvements. It doesn't even take that much just to improve that one little stretch of thoroughfare, if you will, in Ward 1. I'm sorry, go ahead, continue with your thought.
Oh, Jeff, I wholeheartedly agree with you. And one of the things that, again, I'm looking at this not only as a former candidate, but also as a resident and a voter. See, one thing that we don't understand, meaning as voters, to get projects accomplished in city council, it takes 8 other votes, including yours as a sitting council. Now, those are called ordinances. They're not called laws. To get an ordinance passed to pave that section of street, or to have an ordinance passed to do construction in your ward, 8 other votes have to be cast. They have a majority. That gives you 9 votes. If you pull the ordinance record of this councilman, it's flat. It's 0.
So he hasn't. He hasn't proposed anything.
No, sir. He attempts to take credit for projects that he has nothing to do with, such as John F. Kennedy or the Recreation Center. So let's focus on Kennedy. Any school, that is CMSD money.
Right.
School money. That is not city council money. All 17 councilmen are fighting for money out of the same pot, the same bank account, the general fund that's divvied up for street repair, for whatever program. You've probably also heard about recent homes being developed in certain wards, and the term that's bannered about it is affordable housing. What does affordable housing mean? If the median income in the city of Cleveland is $17,000,
right?
It is no way that an individual at that income level is going to be granted a $200,000 mortgage.
Right. Let me ask you I'm glad you raised that up. Let me ask you a question on that, because I'm curious to hear what you have to say about this. And you're listening to The Right Side on No Static Radio, where we don't bring the static, but we sure enough bring the noise. Our call-in number is 216-939-5087. So this so-called affordable housing, and you made a great point here, $200,000 homes and the median income is $17,000. It seems like to me, Mr. Bridges, and you know, you can expound on this too. It seems like to me that what's really being done here is gentrification of these neighborhoods, knowing that for the most part, people who lived in these neighborhoods cannot afford this housing. So guess who's going to come in is people who can afford the housing, and then that's going to allow the tax base to be raised, and therefore basically price people who can stay in that neighborhood or just barely getting by when their property taxes go up, then it's driving them out of that neighborhood. So it seems like to me that this is really a backdoor ploy, if you will, to implement gentrification in order to drive these lower income people out of these neighborhoods. Am I far off base here?
From an economic perspective, Jeff, you are correct. See, one of the things, and if your audience is aware, the county just did a 2-year reappraisal of certain communities. Certain property taxes went up, meaning your property values increased, but that doesn't mean that you can sell that home for that value that the county just assessed it.
Right.
You use the term gentrification. I like to call it regentrification, because certain ethnic groups or cultures are going to return to those communities. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, it does drive us, the Black families, out of community. And again, you're familiar with the big Harvard Ward 1 area, and I know you were growing up over here. It was Ward 13.
Right. This
was the safe haven. This was where a lot of the Black families came to, from the Mount Pleasant area, yes, from the projects, the 80th Street area, 40th Street area. This is where most families wanted to settle. You also had to look across the spectrum. Most families select neighborhoods or communities, cities to live in, based upon the effectiveness of the school district.
Correct.
There's no way, if I had school-aged children and had the economic or financial means to send my children to a private parochial school or another private school, would I send them to Cleveland Public Schools? It's an F-rated school district. Now, that does not mean, and let me be fair, that does not mean they're not going to learn anything, but they're not learning at the same level as a child living in Soda, Orange, or Twinsburg, or Westlake, or whatever the case might be.
Right.
You also have to deal with the issue of safety. Going back to the property values, as you know, the majority of people, let's say on the east side, and more so on Ward 1, are now senior citizens. Their properties generally are paid for, but what they struggle with is the ability to maintain those properties.
And yes, to
I'm going to use. Go ahead, Jeff. I'm sorry.
And yes, to your point, as I said, my mother still lives in Ward 1, okay, and she is a senior. Mm-hmm. And to verify what you just said, when we moved on our street in the Lee Harvard area on Stockbridge, okay, we moved there in February of 1959, a month prior to my 3rd birthday. We lived on off 105th on Austin, and then we moved there, as I said, in February of 1959. At that time, there was only 2 other Black families on the street. By the end of the following year, 1960, the entire street and neighborhood had switched over. And just to give the history of it, and I'll let you continue your point, but just to give the history of it for those that are listening, and this is not just generic to Cleveland, this is metropolitan cities across this country. The people who moved into that area, Mr. Bridges is absolutely correct, are people who were at that time would be classified as middle class, 2 working adults in the home, and were home owners. And now what you see, those who are still there are basically people that have been there that are seniors. You have a lot of people now who are renters of homes now that are new that are coming in there. Very few are buying homes and becoming owners there. What you are seeing, to your point regarding the school system, is that now you're seeing Solon and Twinsburg and places like that becoming the Lee Harvard, the Solons and the Twinsburgs of this world now are becoming what Lee Harvard was back in the early and mid 60s. Now, I'm sorry, go ahead, continue your point. I just wanted to put that in for informational purposes.
And Jeff, again, I agree with you. We were 2 years behind you. My parents moved from Mount Pleasant to the Lee Harvard area in 1961. And the goal was for them to age in place. I'm not saying that's the best thing to do, but that's what they wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And all neighborhoods go through a transition to a degree. If you look at the east side has gone through a transition, but it's stuck. It didn't continue to develop or improve itself. If you drive through the east side, you see more blue tarps on roofs than you see roofs, per se.
Right.
You see more abandoned homes.
Right.
You see more bars and gas stations in certain neighborhoods.
Ward 1.
Again, just to share with the audience, the more bars and gas stations you put in the neighborhood, it degrades your property value. It also can bring unsavory atmosphere or attitudes into your community, for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hours, or whatever the case might be. You don't hear about those issues on what we now call the Cleveland West Side, only on the east side. So we go back, let's say 5, 6 minutes ago. Why would we as voters continue to vote for people who don't support us in our lifestyles? See, it's two important resources that we own as Black people. One are ourselves. That's the most valuable resource that we have. Our families, our parents, our children, grandparents, whatever the case might be. The next most valuable resource that we have are our homes. If I can't maintain my home, or if my property values aren't increasing, meaning I'm not developing equity in my property, I'm upside down. People can be upside down in their homes. If I'm 65, 69 years old, I don't want to take out a new mortgage.
No.
That's crazy to even consider that. But let's focus on Ward 1 here. Ward 1, as you noted, is using a street, and that's maintenance. Streets are maintenance activity.
I'm sorry, your phone broke up. Can your phone broke up? Can you repeat that, please? Your phone broke up. Would you repeat that, please?
Oh, sure. When you talk about streets or potholes, that's maintenance. That's not development. Okay, I think one of the things that we have to be very careful of are the words we use and being able to define them.
Mm-hmm.
That's maintenance work. Harvard's existing. We can change the name from Harvard to Jim Brown Avenue. It's still going to be a street, and every 7 to 5 years or whatever the maintenance cycle is, that street will be repaid. Eaton Corporation, for example, just by name, is not going to build the headquarters in Lee Harvard. It's not going to happen. But you can bring small businesses such as attorneys' offices, accountants' offices,
doctor's office,
small doctor's offices, or whatever, professional practices here. But that doesn't happen. If you go back, and I'm going back 4 years, there have been 17 liquor licenses approved in this community. There's never been a nuisance ordinance filed by the council here.
Right, and I was just going to ask you.
Shooting at. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I said I was just going to ask you, what role does the councilman play in these 17 licenses being issued within the ward?
He votes for them. He voted for them.
Exactly. I just wanted to get that out there.
See, and that's destructive behavior. That's a destructive attitude. Don't say you're supporting your ward if you're bringing liquor licenses in. I'm not, and Jeff, let me make it clear. I'm not knocking having some place to go to relax and be entertained. But if you approve a liquor license for entity A, entity A has 4 or 5 shootings and maybe 1 or 2 killings over a 3-year period, but you never filed a nuisance for it to have that liquor license revoked, because if that's a bar, let's just say, or even a gas station that sells beer and wine, and you don't revoke, meaning you don't submit a nuisance order, that means you condone the behavior.
And it makes you wonder.
That hurts. Go ahead.
No, I mean, it makes you wonder. And again, I have no evidence of this, and so I'm not accusing Councilman Jones of any of this, but it just raises the question. I mean, even an intelligent person would wonder this: what's being paid in order to keep silent, for lack of a better term, on this very blatant and obvious issue that even Stevie Wonder can see? If it's a nuisance, then something ought to be done about it. But when nothing is done about it, it then raises the question, then why is there nothing being done?
And Jeff, you bring up a valid point. It does raise a question. Even Stevie Wonder and Ray Charles and Helen Keller driving in the car would ask the same question, and they're all blind.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the voters aren't aware of.
So, Mr. Bridges,
or they want to close their eyes to.
So let me ask you this.
I'm
sorry, finish your point. I got a question. Go ahead, finish your point. I got a question to ask you.
See, one of the things that's important about voters, and I'm just going to use World War I specifically, they've been lied to so much, too often, they think it's the truth. A person who stands in front of them, such as myself or whoever, Kim, and yourself or whoever, and tells the truth, you become the liar because you're telling the truth. I'm not going to take credit for that statement. When a lie becomes the truth, that goes back to 1932, 33 time.
Yes.
A gentleman by the name of Herman Goebbels stated that.
Yeah, Joseph Goebbels, yes.
He was the propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
He was the propagandist for Adolf Hitler.
Right.
Because he said, the more we can lie that makes the lie the truth, the better off we will be in power.
And that's true. When you're listening to the right side on No Static Radio, we don't bring the static, but we sure enough bring the noise. And so here's the question, and what you say, and from a historical standpoint, is so true. And we see this on a national level with what used to be the Republican Party, which now I call the People's Temple Party, which those who don't know, the People's Temple was what Jim Jones ran. And their whole platform and party is based on the big lie of the election being stolen, and therefore that's why we're seeing all these voter suppression laws across the country either being passed or in the process of trying to be passed. But the question that I wanted to ask you, Mr. Bridges, is this. So everything that you're saying is true. Why is it that do you just think that people have been beaten down? And we'll just use Ward 1 for the example. Do you think people in Ward 1 have been beaten down so much by the lie, but the lie has been repeated over and over and over again, that they believe the lie is true? And how much does, for lack of a better term, voter laziness have to do with believing the lie, number one, and number 1A, not turning out? Because all you have to do, you don't have to rely on Al Bridges calling in to this radio show. You don't have to rely on Jeff Doggett on this radio show or others. to tell you what's really going on. You shouldn't have to. You can do the same thing that Al Bridges did. You can do the same thing that I did, and you all have heard me harp on this ad nauseum on this show. There's a little thing that Al Gore is claiming credit for of inventing called the internet. And whether you want to agree with that or not, that's a whole different story for a different show. But there's this thing that's out there called the internet, folks. And there's this little thing on the internet called Google. And you know what's amazing about it? That if you go to Google and you type in the search engine on Google search and you type in Joe Jones, or you type in Ward 1, or you type in whatever it is that you want to know, guess what will happen? You will get a lot of information that will inform you, and then in turn will help you to go out and make an informed decision for yourself. And then you will be exposed to the truth, and you won't fall for the lie anymore. So, Mr. Bridges, how much then does voter apathy play into all of this? That there was such, I remember there was a time, and it wasn't that long ago, there was a time when one of the biggest turnouts in elections within the city of Cleveland, voter turnouts were the largest, if not the largest, one of the largest turnouts was always in Ward 1. So what has happened? Why is there so much apathy and so much voter laziness now that there is no the turnout has been drastically reduced, and that people are just apt to accept the lie?
Well, let me answer your question going back. There are approximately 16,000 registered voters in Ward 1. 16,000. Only 3,000 voters voted. Right.
So that's less than 20%.
That's less than 20%. Is that due to their apathy, or is that due to the laziness, or is that due to the malaise? I think combination of all three variables come into play. I also think the other thing is they've been, and I don't want to use the term Kool-Aid, I prefer to use the term elixir. They've drunken the elixir. They don't want to type in or go to the internet and type in Ward 1, Joe Jones, whatever the case might be, because they don't want to know the truth. Sometimes, Jeff, the truth hurts. Just because a teacher stands up in front of a class and says 2 + 2 is 10, and says that every day and passes out a test on Friday with one question on it and writes, the question is 2 + 2. The majority of students are going to put 10 so they can pass, but that doesn't mean that's the right answer.
Right.
They've been brainwashed, and I'm using brainwash for a reason, because if you think you're being served by a servant who's lying to you every day for 4 years, for lack of a better term, what do you think you're going to get when that person's elected? You're going to get a liar who's now in office again. We all make mistakes. Everybody does. There's only one perfect being that I know of on this planet.
No, the only one that they killed him, they crucified him.
There's certain things that are intolerable. This gentleman was convicted of a federal felony, mail fraud. He was technically indicted on, I remember, 4 to 6 felonies on the federal side. Mail fraud. He's a thief and a liar. That's
so how is he eligible to even run or hold office if was he just indicted? He was never convicted. Is that why he's able to run? I'm thinking that. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
He was convicted. Jeff.
So how can a convicted felon run for office?
He pled, which means he was convicted.
Mm-hmm.
At the time he ran 4 years ago, nobody tested his running. The Board of Elections does not determine your eligibility based upon your background. They only determine, do you have enough signatures on your petition? See, one thing, Jeff, that's important, that everybody should know. When a candidate such as Mr. Joe puts endorsements on his literature, half of them are fraudulent. He was never endorsed by Local 507. He was never endorsed by SEIU. He was never endorsed by the teachers union.
So how does he get away with it?
In the state of,
Isn't that election fraud? Isn't that election fraud?
well, Jeff, in your mind, in my mind, and maybe 90% of the people who's your audience, yes. But 7 years ago, the Ohio Supreme Court said that's freedom of speech.
Oh, wait a minute, hold on.
The only recourse. Sure, go ahead.
No, wait a minute. You mean to tell me that the Supreme Court of the state of Ohio said that a candidate for an office for city council in the city of Cleveland can actually put lies on his or her campaign literature regarding who has endorsed them, and that does not constitute election fraud? That's free speech. That's what they ruled?
Yes, sir. That's what they ruled.
Hmm.
The election commission was surprised. They were disappointed in the rule. If you and I were running, I could literally say Barack Obama endorsed me.
Yeah.
There's nothing the elections commission could say. Only recourse that I might face is I'm going to make Barack Obama president. The White House counsel might call me and say, well, no, he did not endorse you. Stop, don't use his name or we're going to come after you, whatever, some shape, form, or fashion. I can say anything I want to say because by the Ohio Supreme Court, it's freedom of speech. So I can lie to you as a candidate and make things up, and there's no recourse when we talk about endorsement.
So let me ask you this, and we got to wrap it up. But first of all, thank you so much for calling in. The general election is coming up in a few weeks, and really about a month from now. And the council races will be up for those that are contested, as well as the mayoral election as well. And as you probably well know, because you just pointed out what the very low turnout on what used to be historically high turnout ward, what the low turnout was for the recent primary election. Are you optimistic at all about a better turnout in November? Because in the primary, there was only 16.68% of the eligible voters in the city of Cleveland turned out for the primary, and while Justin Bibb got the most votes, at 10,000 plus votes is a very low number when you look at a city the size of Cleveland. I realize that Cleveland's not the population size that it once was, but the leading candidate in the mayoral primary got about 10,500 votes. So that is a reflection upon the very low voter turnout. And there was also the Nina Turner, Chantel Brown primary back in August, which was again, countywide, was a very low turnout as well. It's only 17% of the eligible voters in Cuyahoga County. I don't know what it was in Summit, because that district encompasses Summit County, at least for now, but they're trying to redraw that line too. So are you optimistic at all that people are going to wake up and come out and vote in larger numbers this November? And if not, what in your opinion, and I'll give you this last thing, Mr. Bridges, what in your opinion then needs to be done to educate voters and to motivate them to turn out and vote?
I think overall, Jeff, we're going to probably see maybe a half, maybe a full point increase in voter turnout in November general election. I think the ability to increase the voter turnout and it's sad. The voters are going to have to start feeling additional pain, especially those who don't vote. When even when, I'm going to include your congressional race that you mentioned, when you talk about 17% voter turnout to elect a congressperson,
which, by the way, was a national, even though it was local, it was really had national repercussions behind it, because that's why you saw all these national figures coming in on both sides, and the coverage it got on CNN and MSNBC and other cable news outlets, and then only 17.82% of the eligible voters turned out. So just to throw that in, I'm sorry, go ahead and continue your point.
And you're correct. And see, one thing, Jeff, that I use as an example, and if we just look at Barack Obama and his qualifications, when he was elected president, if I recall, there was approximately a 23 or 25% turnout, which beats 15 to 16% at the time. That's better than that. If
still
you
not
have
the
an
right home
individual,
about.
may that person be a man or a woman running for mayor or city council, and you still get a 16% turnout or less, something's wrong with the voter. It's not necessarily always the candidate or candidates. It's the voters. The voters have to become engaged, re-energized, understand that they have the authority, the power to make their lives better or worse. Silence means acceptance. I'm not going to give you the back translation for that. Silence means acceptance. So if you don't vote, if we don't vote, that means we've accepted what's been put before us and what has occurred.
Exactly.
I had people call and tell me, Jeff, that they didn't want black people to vote in the primary. I've had people tell me that character and integrity is not important in a candidate. Think about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean,
so regardless of what, go ahead.
No, that the second point sadly can be explained based on what we saw from 2017 to the beginning of this year, what we saw residing at 1600 Pennsylvania about character and integrity not being important in the whole elected office. So,
and I'm going to turn your show into a political endorsement. I think it's sometimes change is painful, but you can't be afraid of it.
No.
Sometimes the right person comes along at the wrong time, or the right person comes along at the right time. That person might only be viable for 4 years, but whatever they do, the change that they bring is positive. And people have to be willing to accept change. We cannot continue to think that this is 1968. We cannot continue to think that this is 1961. Just because I grew up with somebody who lived next door, that doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to vote for that individual. Or I went to school with them. I'm going to be candid with you. I wouldn't vote for Joe Jones if he was running on a pole.
Well, and Mr. Bridges, and I thank you for your call. Let me just end this with this. I echo your sentiments 100%. It saddens me to see where Ward 1 is now and where it was. And I'm not one to live in the past and to wax nostalgic, if you will, because I know that even back in the day, unquote, we definitely had our issues then as well. But what really saddens me is the lack of really just voter awareness, voter excitement, and voter participation. And basically, you get the government that you vote for. And when you have, and let's just specify it to Ward 1, where you have less than 20% of the voters turn out in a primary election, and we don't know what the percentage is going to be in the general in a few weeks from now. But let's say that it increases 10%. So then you go from 15 to 25%. That's still nothing to write home about. So when you have the majority of eligible voters that for whatever reason decide not to exercise that right to vote, then when you look across the country and you see the things that happen in Georgia with the passage of the voter suppression laws, when you see what happened in a state like Texas, where you see the passage of the voter suppression, when you see states like Iowa and Oregon, and even the Republican legislature here in the state of Ohio is trying to enact voter suppression laws, and and I scream and shout and over these airways every week about how we have to fight against this, but then again, it seems as though people don't really care. And they have the attitude as that my vote doesn't count, when as if your vote did not count, why are they trying so hard to suppress it? And so it is just it just gets discouraging sometimes. And basically the reason why you have people like you have as the councilman in Ward 1 and other wards too, for example, Ken Johnson in Ward 4, I'm going to say it, can garner about 8% of the vote. And it's been, he's under indictment for criminal charges, and yet 8% of now, thank God he did not, he's not going to be able to run in November because he didn't finish first or second. But it's sad to think that 8% of the people in Ward 4 would vote for a criminal. And
let's back up. He was actually convicted.
Yes, he was convicted. And people still voted for a convicted criminal.
So, and I don't want to say let me have the last word here.
No, you do.
I share with people, remember the Polaroid camera?
Yes.
You get an instant picture. I encourage people to take their phone or the Polaroid cameras they might have up in the attic or the basement somewhere. Take a picture of Ward 1. This is the best you're going to see it.
You can drop the mic on that one.
This is the best of the worst. What do you think is going to happen in 4 years?
Thank you for your call, Mr. Bridges. That's the walk-off shot right there. Thank you so much. Thank you for your call. And please feel free to call us at any time here on the right side. So glad to have you call in today.
All right, Jeff. You have a great day.
You as well. Thank you. You're listening to the right side on No Static Radio. We don't bring the static, but we sure enough bring the noise. Yes, people listen. People in the Cleveland and Northeast Ohio that are listening to this show right now, and people all across the country, listen, listen, listen. Whether you vote Republican or Democrat or Independent, it is of utmost importance that you find out as much information as you possibly can about the candidates that are representing you. Because these people are your voices in government. If you sit at home and you either don't vote or you don't educate yourself on who these politicians are and these candidates are that are running for these various offices, then you are going to get the government that you either vote for or you don't vote for. Oh, well, I'm not into politics and all that stuff. I don't understand all that. I really don't care about that. Well, listen, you may not be into politics, but politics is into you. Because politics determines the property value of your house. Politics determines the tax base of your house. Politics determines the city services that you're going to get in your neighborhood. Politics determines the type of schools you're going to have in your city. Politics determines the type of police forces that you're going to have and safety. Politics determines the kind of health care and medical facilities that you're going to get. Politics, as Mr. Bridges just pointed out, determines the type of businesses that come into your neighborhood. And yet you're going to sit at home on your AZZ when primary and general elections come around and know more about Nicki Minaj and Beyonce and everybody else than you know about who's representing you in city council or in the mayor's office or in Columbus or in Washington, D.C. Who these judges are. Yes, politics play into that because you're either voting for judges or you're voting for people that are going to appoint judges. People, it's time. Listen. This is too serious of an issue to play with. For example, here in Cleveland, and I'll get to the infrastructure probably in the second hour because that's very important too, and I'm not going to not get on that topic, but I'm glad Mr. Bridges called. In the city of Cleveland, there is an issue on the ballot right now called Issue 24. And that issue, Cleveland is under a consent decree because there had been so much police violence against citizens in the city of Cleveland, primarily citizens of color, that Cleveland is under a consent decree that was actually issued during the Obama administration. And right now there is an issue on the ballot called Issue 24. And Issue 24 is set up a Citizens Commission Board to sit and to examine the police, basically, to examine the training when an incident comes up where there's been police violence against citizens, that this will go before that Citizens Review Board. That's on the ballot. Now, if you don't know about that, and you're a citizen in the city of Cleveland, and you know, let me just even get more specific about it. If you're a citizen of color in the city of Cleveland who is more likely to be a victim, if you will, of police violence, and you don't educate yourself on this issue, or you sit at home and you don't even go out and bother to vote and say this issue does not pass, then guess what? You get exactly what you did not vote for. And God forbid something were to happen to you, and you know your family is crying, they're doing balloon launches and all this kind of stuff, and you did not even bother to vote. And so therefore this issue did not pass, and then the status quo remains the status quo. Whether you know this or not, whether you want to accept it or not, whether you want to believe it or not, I don't care. I really don't care. Reality is reality. Politics govern you from the womb to the tomb. And if you're apathetic, and the majority of people around you are apathetic, if you don't care, they're not going to care either. That's why you see district lines being redrawn. That's why you see yourself being gerrymandered. That's why you see city services not being given to you like they're being given to people in other wards. First thing you want to cry, oh, you're doing this because we black. No, they're doing it to you because you don't care. Because you know why? Because the people in the other wards are getting these city services because they come out and they vote. Because they come out and hold their elected officials accountable. So you get what you vote or you don't vote for. It's as simple as that. You want to sit around, you want to complain, you want to moan and cry and whine all the time, yet all you have to do is to get off of your AZZ. You don't even have to get off, you don't even have to go out and do it now. You can do it by mail. You don't have to go out and go to a polling place now. You can request an absentee ballot. You can fill it out. You can put it in your mailbox or take it to the Board of Elections, which is right across the street from where I am right now, catty corner to where I am right now on 30th and Euclid. If you're in Cuyahoga County, you can just take it there and drop it off, or you can drop it off in the mail and be done with it. It's so simple now. The voter suppression hasn't hit Ohio yet. So what are you going to do? You going to sit around with your homeboys and you know, complain and talk about, you know, how things aren't getting done and this isn't right and that's not right. But are you a propaganda promoter or are you a registered voter? Because if you're just a propaganda promoter, that, you know, some of you may not know this song, and I'm aging myself when I say it, but if you're just a propaganda promoter and not a registered voter, you're like that old James Brown song, talking loud and saying nothing. All you're doing is running your mouth and you're not doing anything. Talk, talk, talk. Put some walk behind that talk. You want us to get some things changed? You tired of seeing things going wrong in your neighborhood the way they're happening right now? You know what you do? You become involved. Organize your street. Get a block club together. Become a block captain. Go to these meetings. Hold these people accountable. Find out who your elected officials are. I bet if I did a quiz right now, and I'm not going to do it, but if I did a quiz right now, most of you would not even know who your state congressperson is. You don't know who yours is either, Jeff. I'm wrong. Mine is Juanita Brent, District 12. I don't have a congressperson yet because I'm in District 11, Congressional District 11, and that election won't be until November. It used to be Marshall Fudge. Want to quiz me on some more? Go ahead. 216-939-5087. But do you know, I'm not trying to come off trying to sound like I'm smarter than you, because I'm not. The only reason why I know who these people are is because I'm involved, because I take the time to look up who they are, what they represent, and what they're doing. So I can do what? Be an educated voter. You can do the same thing. While you on the internet looking at all this other stuff, you know, playing games on there or looking at the Real Housewives of Atlanta, whatever you're doing, take some time to find out what's really important, what really affects your life. You're listening to The Right Side on No Static Radio. We don't bring the static, but we should not bring the noise. Thank you so much, Mr. Bridges, for your call. And again, I want to stress, those of you that are in the city of Cleveland, first of all, if you're not registered to vote, please, you have 2 more days. Today is October 2nd. You have until October the 4th to register. If your address has changed, you have until October the 4th to let the Board of Elections know that your address has changed so that you won't be going to the wrong precinct. Early voting starts on October the 5th. You can request your absentee ballots now. Please vote for this issue 24, folks. This is needed. If you really want to see, here's why. You know, I was hopeful that the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act would pass. It did pass through the Congress. It hasn't even come to a vote on the floor of the Senate yet. Congressman Karen Bass, Democratic Congresswoman from California, Democratic Congresswoman Karen Bass, Democratic Senator from New Jersey, Cory Booker, and Republican Senator from South Carolina, Tim Scott. They were working together on a bipartisan presentation of this bill. But you know what happened last week? They basically gave it up because they couldn't come to an agreement, basically because Senator Tim Scott, black in skin, Republican senator from South Carolina, basically would not budge on qualified immunity. Now, and that's non-negotiable. Now, if you don't know what qualified immunity is, it's basically this. Anytime, for what you have going on now is that anytime a police officer, let's use the Trayvon Martin case, excuse me, not Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice case here in Cleveland. Very famous case here. The Rice family, if they wanted to sue based on what happened, the murder of their then 12-year-old son, it would be the city of Cleveland that the lawsuit would be brought against, and the city of Cleveland that would have to pay out to the family whatever the agreed amount is. And the reason for that is that police have qualified immunity, meaning that civil suits cannot be brought against them for their actions as officers. If you remove qualified immunity, now civil suits can be brought against that individual officer rather than that city that he or she is employed by. What is the advantage of this, you ask? The advantage of this is that it in all likelihood could possibly cause an officer to think before they do something that is going to cause somebody to lose their life. If they think that this is going to come back on them personally and that they can be have civil action taken against them, even if they're acquitted criminally, if they think the civil action can be brought against them, then it may cause them to rethink the action that they're going to take. For some reason, Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina did not want to include that provision, which is a very important provision in the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. So for now, that legislation sits dormant, is not even on the floor of the Senate to be voted on. And now, if it's going to be enacted, the Democrats, while they still have control of the House, because it's a 50-50, of the Senate, because it's a 50-50 split, but Vice President Kamala Harris can break any ties. So the only way, as it sits now, that we're going to get this into legislation is that they're going to have to do it through reconciliation. And right now, to be very honest with you, there's not really a lot of traction on getting that legislation passed through in reconciliation. So I say all that to say this: since this is in all likelihood, at least for the near future, is not going to happen on the national level, then we have to act upon this issue as stringently as we can and stridently as we can on the local level, which means here in the city of Cleveland, folks, voters, you must pass issue 24. Because while it's not going to give qualified immunity, it does set up this Citizens Review Board that will always keep the consent decree permanent, so that it will not expire, and that there can be some actions taken upon these officers who step out of line. That's what we're going to have to do here on the local level until something happens on the national level. And even if it does happen on the national level, we still need to act on the local level. So while you're sitting at home and thinking that your vote doesn't count and elections don't mean anything and politics is not, I'm not really into that, that's not my thing, why, I'm pretty sure that if you get stopped by the police, I'm pretty sure you'd be thinking about it then, wouldn't you? Yeah, I know you would. So listen, don't listen to me. Go and look up, those of you that are within the city of Cleveland, just Google search and look up issue 24 for yourself. Find out everything there is about it so that you can make an educated decision, but make the decision. Don't let other people make the decision for you. You cannot continue to be apathetic. You cannot continue to have this laissez-faire, I don't care attitude and expect to get any progress from your elected officials. They only cater to those who they feel they have to answer to. And if you're sitting at home on your behind and not voting, not finding out about the issues, not holding these candidates responsible and holding them accountable, showing up at the meetings, then guess what? They don't care about you and they're not going to do nothing for you. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Well, it don't make any difference anyway. They ain't going to do nothing for me anyway. Yeah, you're right. If you sit at home and you don't care, and you don't go to the meetings, and you don't find out about them, and you don't know anything about the issues, yeah, you're right. They're not going to do anything for you. You know what? Why should they? You don't care, so why should they care? All right, I'm off my soapbox. You're listening to The Right Side on No Static Radio. We don't bring the static, but we sure enough bring the noise. In the news the last few days has been what I call the Democratic dilemma, the Democratic Party dilemma. And this is all the back and forth regarding the infrastructure. Now, there's two infrastructure bills right now before the Congress. There's a $1.5 trillion infrastructure bill. Let me just tell you everything that it encompasses. And then, by the way, this has bipartisan support. All right? But it has not passed the House, and I'm going to tell you why in just a moment. But it does have bipartisan support. What this bill, the $1.5 trillion, and by the way, this is over a 10-year period. This is not spending up $1.5 trillion in next year's budget. This is over a 10-year period. So it has a lot of good things in it. It provides for repair of roads and bridges and Amtrak and clean water, especially for what happened in Flint, Michigan, broadband, which, we saw the negative results of that last year during the pandemic, where, kids had to go to school basically on the internet, and a lot of, especially within inner city areas and areas of people of color dwell, they did not have the broadband, so the kids fell behind, or they had to put their lives in danger by going to libraries and other places to try to keep up. Well, this infrastructure bill provides for broadband, so it has a lot of good things in it. And let me tell you what it has, and then I'm going to tell you what the debate is on it. So let me ask you a question. Those of you listening out here, these are rhetorical questions, but I just want to know how you feel. Do you think, or do you believe that free community college is a good thing? I think you would say yes to that. Do you believe, or you think that a increased family leave plan would be a good thing? So if someone has to take off of their job because they have a crisis in their family, and rather than being put in a economic hardship situation under the family leave plan, an increase in that they would not lose as much money having to take this time off. Does that sound like a good thing to you? What about free pre-K for children? That sounds like a pretty good thing, doesn't it? Sounds like one to me. What about climate control and money set aside for climate control and to move away from fossil fuel and move more towards electric and solar energy? That sounds like a pretty good thing to me. How about you? That sounds pretty good to me too. All of these things are in the Build Back Better $3.5 trillion infrastructure plan, which, by the way, is supported by 68% of American people. That's not just Democrats or independents, folks. This is people all across the country. Americans, regardless of their political affiliation, support both of these. So it seems like a no-brainer. Seems like a slam dunk, right? That this legislation will be passed. No big biggie. 68% of the people, and sorry. First of all, there is no, nada, nix, nil, whatever language that you want to speak that says no or nothing. There is zero Republican support for this Build Back Better, even though majority of Republican voters support it. So I'll let that resonate for a minute. Not nary Republican voted or supporting this, even though the majority of their constituents support it. So since the Democrats have the majority in both the Senate and the House, at least for now. Oh, by the way, it also would increase in Medicaid, which would drive down drug costs. Was something very important to me, because even though I'm in denial, the fact of the matter is that I'm eligible for Medicaid and Medicare right now. I don't have it yet because I'm working, but I soon hope to retire from my job. And this is going, if this would be enacted, it would increase Medicaid, which would drive down the cost of prescription drugs, drive down the cost of glasses and hearing aids and other things that are needed. Sounds like a pretty good thing too, right? Even if you don't need it now, you keep living. One day you may need it if you keep living. So seems like this should be a no-brainer. Unfortunately, it's not. As we said, this has no Republican support at all. And it has to be done basically by the Democrats. Well, that's fine. Okay, the Democrats have control of the House. The Democrats have control of the Senate, and they can do it by reconciliation. As a matter of fact, that's how they're talking about getting this bill back better done, is through reconciliation, since they know they do not have the 10 Republican votes they need to have 60 to make it filibuster proof. They're going to go around the filibuster, which, why can't we do that for the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act or the John Lewis Voting Rights Bill or the For the People Act? I don't know. I won't even get into that right now. I'm going to stay on this. So what's the holdup, you ask? Well, the holdup is this, folks. There are 2 Democratic senators, one from the state of West Virginia by the name of Joe Manchin, and one from the state of Arizona by the name of Kyrsten Sinema, who are basically gumming up the whole works. So let's deal with Senator Manchin first, because at least he has spoken on it. Senator Manchin says that he would only support a $1.5 trillion. Now, I know I'm talking $1 trillion. That's just numbers that none of us can even fathom. Okay, we don't care how many trillions, just get it done. But he's saying that he would only support a $1.5 trillion Build Back a Better infrastructure. He says 3.5 is too much. So what's the reason behind that? Well, Senator Manchin is lobbied and supported by lobbyists from Exxon Oil. So if he is supported by lobbyists by Exxon, and he's getting a lot of money from Exxon, and part of this infrastructure bill would be moving away from fossil fuel energy and more towards electric and solar energy, then that would make you wonder, right? That would make you think that that's going to hurt his donors. That's going to hurt those lobbyists who support him. So isn't that a coincidence that he would not want to support a full measure BBB, but only a $1.5 trillion one? And his reasoning behind it says it's too expensive. Well, let's look at this. Let me just throw this fact out to you folks. He says that $3.5 trillion is too much, that he only supports a $1.5 trillion. And again, I can't even fathom $1 trillion. That's more money than I would live 12 lifetimes and still wouldn't even see that amount. But I digress. Did you know that the United States military budget is not 1.5 trillion. It's not even 3.5 trillion. The United States military budget is $7 trillion over the same 10-year period that we're talking about, this infrastructure that would lower medical costs, that would give free pre-K, that would increase the amount of money people can receive on family leave, that would give free community college, and the other things that I pointed out that are within this. The military gets twice as much as what even the 3.5 is, because they get $7 trillion over the same 10-year period. Mind you, we're talking about a 10-year period. We're not talking about next year. We're talking about over a 10-year period, folks. Yet I don't hear Senator Manchin talking about, well, the military is getting too much. I don't hear anybody saying that. So the fact is this, folks, is the money is there and it can be done. And here's the other thing. Well, let me get to good old Miss Kyrsten Sinema. When she was pressed on this the other day, First of all, she hasn't said anything at all. She's been doing the rope-a-dope better than Muhammad Ali did against George Foreman that time. Her only public comment has been this. She was cornered in the hall of the Senate the other day by reporters. And the reporters asked her that her progressive colleagues in the House were concerned as to where she was at. And she knew what they were talking about when they asked the question, but her smart alecky response to that was, well, I'm in the Senate. Duh, laugh track, nobody's laughing, Kirsten. So then when they pressed her to say, well, your colleagues in the Senate would like to know where you are too, since you're going to be smart aleck about it. And then her response to that was, well, I'm right here by the elevator. That's where I am. So why is Miss Sinema so silent and leaning towards not supporting this? Well, here again, and again, I don't know someone's heart. Only they know their heart and only the Lord knows their heart. However, I'm not dumb either. Might not be the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I'm not the dullest either. Kyrsten Sinema is has lobbyists from Big Pharma that are contributing to her. Why is that important, you ask? Because again, if this Build Back Better passes with the $3.5 trillion over 10 years, that's going to lower prescription costs as well. Not to mention that these big corporations like Exxon, like Big Pharma, guess what else that's going to do? It's going to make them pay more taxes. Because how this is going to be financed, it's going to be financed for people who are making $400,000 a year or more. They're going to get an increase in their taxes, many of whom, through loopholes and other devices, are not even paying as much tax as you and I are, and they're making gobs more amount of money per year than we are. And yet you're paying more in tax than what they are paying. So you see how this is working, folks? You see how this is working out about, you all have heard the phrase about follow the money? Well, follow the money on this, because this is what it is all about. Now, let me get to the area that I'm involved in, and this is the media, because this is what this is, folks. This show is part of the media. And the narrative in the media is to make this as a progressive versus moderate. You got these progressives that are holding up the passage of the $1.5 trillion infrastructure because they want to do both bills at one time. And you know what? I support them on that, because here's what they know. They know that if they don't get this now, because they even heard Joe Manchin say, well, let's just pass the 1.5 and we can deal with trying to get the 3.5 trillion passed next year. What's going to change, Joe? Are you going to change your mind and decide to vote for it next year? No. They know, like anybody knows, that if they don't get it done now, it's not going to get done, especially next year, when next year is an election year. Because the midterm elections are next year in 2022, and a lot of gubernatorial seats, but also Senate seats and House seats are going to be up. So they know that this is not going to get done next year. Joe Manchin knows that too. I don't know why. He must think people are stupid. He knows this also. So the media is trying to paint this as a progressive versus moderate. I'm going to get into why the progressives are holding this up in a moment. I'll delve more into it in a moment, but let's look at it for what it is. Folks, don't believe what you hear in the media. This is not a progressive versus moderate. This is Joe Biden. The things that are in the Build Back Better are the things that Joe Biden campaigned on. Joe Biden campaigned on free community college last year. Joe Biden campaigned rather on increasing the family leave. Joe Biden campaigned on free pre-K. Joe Biden campaigned on solar and electric energy. He campaigned on all of these things. So this is not a progressive versus moderate. Joe Biden, 81 million people, the largest amount of votes that any presidential candidate has received in the history of this country were received by Joe Biden last year. 81 million Americans voted for this last year when they voted for Joe Biden. Joe Biden certainly is not a progressive. Joe Biden won the Democratic candidacy last year because the Democrat voters wanted somebody that was more centrist. That's why he won out over Bernie Sanders. I mean, let's keep it real, folks. You would never confuse Joe Biden with Bernie Sanders, or for that matter, with Ted Kennedy. Joe Biden is not a liberal. He's not a progressive. He is a moderate, despite the lies that you'll hear on Fox and Newsmax and American One Network and idiot right-wing talk show hosts that lie, that try to paint him as some kind of socialist. It's ridiculous. It would be almost funny if it wasn't sad, because a lot of dumb people are believing that canine feces. So what this Build Back Better program is, folks, is basically the platform that Joe Biden ran on last November that 81 million people voted for. So this is not a progressives versus moderate. This is not AOC versus Jim Clyburn or anything like this. This is the platform that Biden ran on, and what people voted, the people who voted for him last year voted for him to install. Now, why are the so-called progressives holding up the vote on the 1.5 trillion? Because they know that if they vote and get the $1.5 trillion over 10-year infrastructure bipartisan pass, they know that they can basically kiss the Build Back Better goodbye, because it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen, folks. It's not going to happen next year. And the danger in that is that next year the Democrats could lose the House and maybe the Senate. So you know it's not going to happen then. So they are wise. They're not only doing the politically savvy thing, they're doing basically the right thing by refusing to vote on this $1.5 trillion infrastructure plan without the 3.5 Build Back Better being passed. They're doing the right thing. And I support what they're doing. I'm more moderate in my leanings, but I support what they are doing, because I even know, and I'm not in the Congress and I'm not even in the Senate, but I even know that if it doesn't get done now, it's not going to get done. And here's the ramifications of that. So you're not going to get the things that I mentioned that this provides. But you know what else is going to happen? It goes back to what we were talking about earlier about voter turnout. So 81 million people, as I said last year, voted for Joe Biden. If you think about it, what were some of the things that he campaigned on? Well, I just talked about the things that he campaigned on that are in this infrastructure package, but he also campaigned on voter rights. He also campaigned on police reform. He made the statement on that Saturday back in November when it was finally declared that he won the election, that he said that Black America had my back. And now that I'm elected, I've got yours. Joe Biden knows that the reason that he got put into office was basically because people of color, blacks, Latinos, Asian people, young people, turned out and voted him in. And now, why did they vote for him? Well, of course, one is because we wanted to get rid of the embarrassment known as Donald Trump. But others, the other reason why we voted, we wanted police reform. We wanted something done about climate change. We wanted something done about Medicare and drug costs and all of those and all of this. We wanted free community college. We wanted all of these things. That's why we voted for him. So let's look at the record now. So far, they have not been able to deliver on voting rights. The John Lewis Voting Rights Act sits dormant right now in the Senate. The For the People Act sits dormant in the Senate. As I said a little while ago, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act sits dormant. This legislation, basically right now, folks, is dead. The only way that it's going to get enacted is that it has to be done while the Democrats still have control of the Senate and get done through reconciliation. And I don't see a lot of movement or traction right now, at least right now, to get that done. So let's see. So we came out and voted last year for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris because we wanted police reform. And yet the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act sits dormant. We want to see now that these states like Texas and Georgia and Iowa and others, and Oregon, have enacted these voter suppression laws. We want to see voting rights, federal voting rights legislation passed. Well, guess what? John Lewis Voting Rights Act sits dormant. The For the People Act sits dormant. Okay, so we're not getting police reform, at least right now. We're not getting voting right protection on the federal level, at least for now. All right, we don't like that. But surely, since the Democrats have control of the House and the Senate and the White House, surely we're going to get climate control legislation. We're going to get free pre-K. We're going to get increased family leave monies. We're going to get free community college. We're going to get Medicaid. We're going to get all of that. No, we're not. At least for now, we're not. So here's the danger, folks. As we were talking with our caller earlier, Mr. Bridges, who called in, what the city of Cleveland is a microcosm of the general attitude throughout the country of apathy and voter unawareness and basically a laissez-faire attitude. So if you cannot and have not delivered on these various legislations and desires and things that we voted you into office for, remember you said you had our back, then it's going to be very difficult to motivate voters to come out next year. And next year is crucial because there are several gubernatorial elections next year in the midterm. There are several House and Senate seats that are up. And if the Republicans get control of the House and the Senate, then you can kiss all of this goodbye. It's not going to happen. This is why it is imperative that this legislation get done now, not next year, because it's not going to get done next year. Get done now. So, what can you do, you ask? Well, call your senators, call your congressional people, and get on them. Blow their phones up. Those of you that are listening to us in West Virginia, I commend the people I saw on MSNBC the other day. Senator Joe Manchin lives on a houseboat on the Potomac River in Washington, D.C. called Almost Heaven because, that's what the slogan of the state of West Virginia is. And some of his constituents, I don't know how I don't know if they rented the boat, if it was their boat or whatever, they rolled up to his boat on the Potomac River and engaged him in conversation, basically telling him to pass this legislation because they need it in West Virginia. Folks, listen, this is not a white thing. It's not a black thing, a Latino thing, or an indigenous person thing. This is a people thing. We all need this. And what's going to happen is if the Democrats are unable to deliver on voting rights, which it looks like, unless something happens in the next few months or so, that's going to happen. If they're unable to deliver on police reform, which unless something happens in the next few months, that looks like that's what's going to happen. And if they are unable to deliver on this very important infrastructure bill, both of them, then the prevailing thought across this country among those 81 million who turned out just less than a year ago, about 11 months ago tomorrow, because election day was November 3rd last year. There's going to be an attitude across this country, folks, of people saying, why should I vote? They didn't do what they said they were going to do. And you know what? While I don't agree with the sentiment of why should I vote, but what they said basically is true, because they wouldn't have done what they said they were going to do. So let's get this done, folks, because this is a turning point. This is very critical, not only for now, but in the history of this nation. Because I'm going to tell you, it's just as sure as I'm sitting here at 5:40 in the afternoon, Eastern Daylight Time, on Saturday, October the 2nd, in the year of our Lord 2021. I'm going to tell you, if the Republicans get back control of the Senate and the House, it is going to set this country back. You already see what they're doing in states where they control. And listen, I'm not making this partisan. I'm just telling you what the facts are. You already have seen what has happened in the state of Georgia with the voter suppression laws that they enacted, all based on the big lie. Mr. Bridges, who called from Ward 1 in Cleveland, Ohio, last hour or so ago, made the statement that bears repeating. This is nothing new. This was something that was done by the Nationalsozialistische Arbeiter Partei, the Nationalsozialistische Deutsches Arbeiterpartei in Germany during the 30s. You know them better as the Nazi Party. Joseph Goebbels, the propaganda minister, said, we tell the big lie, that if you tell a lie enough and make it big enough and repeat it enough, people will believe the lie. And that's what we see happening right here in this country right now, folks. The Republican Party has repeated the big lie. And they've said it over and over again with their lackeys and cohorts in right-wing media who have played into the big lie. That the election last year was stolen. They just wasted all this taxpayer money in the state of Arizona running an audit, which I call and I got it from Joy Reid, but it's so true. It was called the fraudit. And guess what the fraudit proved? After all these months, started back in February, they're supposed to have an answer in April. They finally got the answer in late September. And you know what it proved? That Joe Biden won the election. And guess what? That when they did this fraudit by these, quote, cyber ninjas, unquote, found out that actually Joe Biden got about 389 more votes than what he had in November of last year. The big lie has been proven to be a lie and has been exposed everywhere. It's popped its ugly head up. And yet Now they want to have a frauded in Pennsylvania. Now they want to do a frauded in the state of Michigan. But you know what? They don't want to do it for the whole state, though. No. See, they didn't even do the frauded for the whole state of Arizona. They only did it in Maricopa County, where there are people of color reside. Oh, even the state of Texas, the state, by the way, that Trump won, they want to do a frauded, but they're not doing the frauded for the whole state. They're doing it in Harris County, and which is where Houston is, and the county where Dallas is. And what's common about those two, other than those are two large cities in Texas? Well, what's common about those two counties, folks, is that a majority of population in those counties are people of color, blacks and Latinos and Chicano people. So the fraud is being exposed for what it is, and what it really is the attempt for white supremacists to continue to perpetuate white supremacy in order to hold on to power, which means, and brings me back to my point, if we don't get this infrastructure legislation passed and people don't come out and vote next year, guess who's going to be in control of this government and running this government? You got it. The white supremacists of the Republican Party. I'm not saying things for shock value and try to scare you. I'm telling you like it TI is, like it really is. And so that's how important this is. So what can you do, since you can't go to Washington and vote on this legislation because you're not an elected member of the Congress or the Senate? But what you can do is you can bang your senator and bang your congressperson, even if they support it, call them anyway. Get on their nerves. I'm going to tell you the effectiveness of that. I'm in the city of Cleveland. And in 1995, Art Modell, who was then owner of the Cleveland Browns, moved the Cleveland Browns to Baltimore and was going to call them the Baltimore Browns. Took this treasured franchise, ripped it from this city, moved it to Baltimore, was going to call it the Baltimore Browns. You know what happened? You know why the Baltimore Ravens are not called the Baltimore Browns right now? What happened was that people of Cleveland and Northeast Ohio, and this was a time when when fax machines were very, very prevalent, people of Northeast Ohio called the NFL offices in New York and bombarded them incessantly, sent so many faxes that it broke all the fax machines in the offices of the NFL, and pestered them to the point where the NFL went into an agreement to return the franchise to the city of Cleveland with the colors that they had and the name that they had. No other city who's just as a point of information, no other NFL city that's lost a franchise got that back. When the Houston Oilers left and went to Nashville and became the Tennessee Titans, when they got a franchise in Houston, they were called the Houston Texans. They didn't get their colors back. They didn't get their name back. When the St. Louis football Cardinals left St. Louis and went to Phoenix and they got another team, they didn't get their colors. They didn't get their name back. Only that, you know why? The reason that Cleveland got it, I'm just using this as an illustration, because of the pressure that Northeast Ohio put on the National Football League. So if a city and a county can do that for a sports franchise, which, you know, I'm an NFL fan and a Browns fan, and matter of fact, in a few moments, we're going to give our picks for this week's games, but that's nowhere near as important as this. So if a city and a region can do that, can just so bug, for lack of a better term, the offices of the National Football League that forced their hand into bringing this franchise back to the city of Cleveland with its colors and its name. That's what the power of the people can do. And folks, that's what you and I can do. To put the pressure, because pressure bursts pipes, to put the pressure on these elected officials in order to get this very important legislation done. But you know what? If you sit around on your AZZ and you don't do anything or say anything, then you're not going to get anything. And you know what? If and when that happens, I don't want to hear anything from you. You got nothing to say. Nothing. You're fugazi, which means fake. So it's up to you. You listen to the right side on No Static Radio. We don't bring the static, but we sure enough bring the noise. Our calling number is 216-939-5087, 216-939-5087. So if you're a regular listener to this show, you know we talk both sports and politics and the issues of the day. And we're within the NFL season right now. So I want to give my picks for this week's games. I'm only going to do a few of the games. As I said, I'm not doing every game. So, you know, if you're sitting there waiting on bated breath for me to give my prediction on the Detroit Lions, Chicago Bears game tomorrow, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that. So those of you listening in Detroit and Chicago right now, I'm not going to do it. Just think back to those days when the Browns were horrible and nobody really cared about them. And, you know, that's why. No slight against you guys, but I'm only looking at what I think are the relevant games. Now, as I said in the beginning, this is for entertainment purposes only. Do not go out and bet the ranch or the house on what I'm giving here, because if you lose, don't come looking for me. All right? Okay, here it goes. First game I want to look at is this. The Carolina Panthers 3-0 visit Jerry World to play the 2-1 Dallas Cowboys tomorrow. Now, Carolina has been one of the surprise teams this year. Ex-Jet quarterback Sam Darnold got out of New York and had a rebirth. You know, he probably think that he died and went to heaven, getting away from ex-coach Adam Gase, who's not in the league anymore, and that horror show that was and still is the New York Jets. Hopefully they'll get Christian McCaffrey, their all-world running back tomorrow. The Cowboys, through the draft, have upgraded their defense, and especially this past Monday night, they really look good against the Eagles. Dak Prescott is having thus far an MVP-type season. Cowboys are favored, and I look for the Cowboys to prevail in this game, although it should be a really close game. And I look for Dallas to win, let's say 31-27. The second game I want to look at is the Seattle Seahawks visit San Francisco to take on the 49ers. 49ers are coming off of a heartbreaking loss last week against the Packers on Sunday Night Football when they scored a touchdown with 30 seconds left in the game to put them ahead by 1 point. And they thought they had won the game till they forgot who was on the other sideline, and that was Aaron Rodgers, who took the Packers down the field with no timeouts in that 30 seconds and had Mason Crosby kick a game-winning field goal as time expired. The Seahawks are coming off back-to-back losses, one at home to the Titans 2 weeks ago in overtime, which is unfathomable because the Seahawks rarely lose at home. And after leading the Minnesota Vikings 17-7 at the half last week, the Seahawks lost to the Vikings 30-17 in that game. This game is at San Francisco. The Seahawks are desperate. They need this win because they certainly don't want to go to 1-3. But I'm going to give the Niners the edge here, and I'm just basically giving, this is really a pick'em game in my opinion, but I'm giving the Niners a slight edge here only because they're playing at home. This game is in Seattle. I'd go for the Seahawks in that. Next one I want to look at is the Monday night matchup when the Las Vegas Raiders go to SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles to play the the Los Angeles, who should still be the San Diego Chargers, but I'm not going to get into that right now. The Raiders are another one of those surprise teams of 3-0. They right now own the AFC North as they defeated both the Ravens and the Steelers and then beat the Dolphins last week in overtime. The Chargers are coming off a big emotional win on the road at Kansas City, where they pulled that game out after being ahead 14-0, falling behind 17-14, and they wound up winning the game 27-24 behind their soon-to-be inducted into Canton in the Hall of Fame quarterback. If I listen to some of these pundits, no, Justin Herbert is good, but I still want to pump the brakes on him. I like him. I'm not as high on him as some of these so-called experts are. But I look for the Chargers to prevail in this game and bring the Raiders back down to earth. Although Raider quarterback Derek Carr is having a great season right now and is an early candidate, but very early because we've only played 3 games, for the MVP. So next we want to go to the other LA team, and that's the Rams, who host the Arizona Cardinals on Sunday. So the Chargers and the Rams both play in the same stadium, but the Chargers will be playing on Monday night and the Rams will be playing on Sunday afternoon. They host the 3-0 Cardinals. Folks, I think the Cardinals are fugazi. They're 3-0, but they can very easily be 1-2. They were playing the horrible Jaguars last week, and the Jaguars had a 19-10 lead on them going into the fourth quarter till they imploded. And the week prior to that, they lost to the Vikings only because the Vikings field goal kicker missed a chip shot field goal as time expired that would have won the game for the Vikings that week. So the Cardinals have a very impressive offense led by Kyler Murray, ex-Bengal AJ Green, of course, and also, of course, all-world receiver DeAndre Hopkins, D-Hop as they call him. But I'm not sold on the Cardinals, and I think that the Rams, especially that defense, which, really shut down the defending world champion Bucks last week, led by Aaron Donald and company, are going to do the same thing to the Cardinals, so I'm going with the Rams in that one. The next one we want to look at is, speaking of the Bucks, those defending world champion Bucks, is homecoming week in New England. No, it's not a homecoming game in the sense that you have in college or high school, but it's homecoming in that Rob Gronkowski is coming back to New England, right, folks? And that's what all the hype is about this game, that Gronk is coming back. No, that's not what the hype is about. Gronk is coming back, but he's questionable as to whether he's going to play as he's dealing with the injury. But of course we know that all the hype in this game is about Tom Brady coming back to the place that he won 6 Super Bowl rings, facing the coach that he won those Super Bowl rings with, Mr. Effervescent and effusive personality himself, and that is the excitable Bill Belichick. So we know that he's coming back there. This is going to be the Sunday night game on NBC. They said on NBC Nightly News last night that there's some tickets that are going for up to $1,000 for that game, which is crazy. I wouldn't even pay that much for the Super Bowl, let alone a regular season game, but it is what it is. So the Bucks are coming in off of a loss last week to the Rams. The Patriots are coming in after a loss as well to the Saints, with rookie quarterback Mac Jones, or some are calling Mac Brady because they think he's going to be the next Tom Brady, but you better change those thoughts. But so who's going to get the best of whom in this game? Well, folks, let me say this. This will be one of the few times that I'll ever root for the New England Patriots. That's how much I'm not a Tom Brady fan. But rooting interest aside, I think that the Bucks are going to win this game, and I really don't even think it's going to be close. I look for the Bucks to win from anywhere between 10 to 14 points. I don't think that Mac Jones is ready yet. I think that the Bucks defense is going to force him into turnovers, and I think that Brady is going to prevail over Belichick and the Patriots on tomorrow evening, although I will really be rooting for the Patriots tomorrow and hope that Coach Belichick will get the better of Mr. Brady, but don't count on it. The next game then that we want to look at here is that the Baltimore Ravens go to Invesco Field in Denver to take on the Denver Broncos tomorrow. And the Ravens are a 1-point favorite in this game. But I'm really concerned about the altitude there, and especially the altitude when it comes to Lamar Jackson. Because as you know, if you follow the NFL at all, Lamar Jackson has had 2 bouts with COVID. And I'm just wondering how that will that Mile High atmosphere will affect him tomorrow. The Broncos defense, led by Von Miller and company, and head coach Fangio, I think will be able to put the brakes to Jackson. And if you're betting this game, I would say bet the under on it. And I'm going with the home team on this one. I'm going with Denver to pull this one out. The next game we want to look at is that the Pittsburgh Steelers visit Lambeau Field in Green Bay to take on the Green Bay Packers. The Steelers are coming off a loss last week to the Bengals at home, where Ben Roethlisberger, their quarterback, looked like he was about 78 years old in that game. There was one play where he took a snap and fell down, wasn't pressured, fell down on his own. He threw the ball 58 times last week. Very few were down the field. Steelers couldn't run the ball. They couldn't pass protect Ben. And Ben looks like he's ready for the glue factory, folks. Flip side of that is, as I said earlier about when we were looking at the 49ers Seahawks game, Aaron Rodgers, despite all the offseason drama and all the consternation in Green Bay after their week 1 blowout loss against the Saints, can now get to that point where he can tell the Packer fans once again to RELAX like he has before. And I look for Green Bay to prevail in this game tomorrow and continue the demise of one Ben Roethlisberger, who really should have retired at the end of last season because he's making an embarrassment of himself, in my opinion, as he goes out there. And those are the Steelers' problems, and I don't feel sorry for them at all as a Browns fan. And that brings me to my last game. And that is that the Cleveland Browns visit the Minnesota Vikings tomorrow in their brand new stadium. Dome Stadium, one of the loudest stadiums in the NFL. Kevin Stefanski is coming home to a place where he worked for 16 years in various capacities with the Vikings, knows the city, knows the organization very well, and they know him very well. And he's coming home, not the same type of homecoming that Brady has going back to New England, but homecoming nonetheless. There's been some question as to what kind of terms he left there on, as Coach Mike Zimmer denied Stefanski being able to go to New York with Pat Shurmur when he got hired as a Giants head coach, wanted to bring Stefanski along with him as the offensive coordinator, and Zimmer said no, and I don't think Stefanski has forgotten that. The Vikings are coming off of a huge win, as we talked about earlier, against the Seahawks last week. They're 1-2. That record is deceiving because they could very easily be 3-0. We talked about the game they lost to the Cardinals when they should have won. Their field goal kicker missed a chip shot. And their first game of the year against the Bengals in Cincinnati, in overtime, Dalvin Cook fumbled, which led to the Bengals' game-winning score. The Vikings have one of the best offenses in the league, led by Kirk Cousins, who hasn't thrown an interception this season. Also with Dalvin Cook, their all-pro running back, will be back for this game after sitting out last week. And Adam Thielen and Mr. Jefferson needs not to be said. Nothing needs to be said about them. They are a dynamic pair of wide receivers. So they have a lot of offensive weapons. Their defense is so-so. The Browns are coming off a game defensively where they look like the 2000 Ravens, the 85 Bears, or the Steelers steel curtain of the 70s, albeit against a rookie quarterback that was overmatched with a bad offensive line, but still they got the job done with 9 sacks, 4.5 by Myles Garrett. The offense did just enough to win the game. Nick Chubb had a pedestrian game for him. He still gained 81 yards. What starved that game offensively was Kareem Hunt, who's been described this week as running from all different descriptions as one running style like a Tasmanian devil. That's what Baker Mayfield said about him. As to a raging bull, as like what Odell Beckham said about him. Speaking of which, Odell now has a game under his feet, so we should look for more production from him tomorrow. So how do I see this game? I see this game as an offensive shootout tomorrow. The last team with the ball wins, and the Browns are favored by 2 points. However, and this is one of these hope I'm wrong picks that I'm about to make, I'm picking Minnesota to win the game tomorrow, picking them to win 34-30. Please, Browns, make me wrong. So we're near at the end of our show right now. As we end each show, each week we end this one too with our hero and our zero of the week. Our hero of the week is our 5-star General Mark Milley. You may remember him from when then President Donald Trump went on his walk to hold the Bible upside down in front of that church. Milley walked with him, and he said how much he regretted that. And Mark Milley also then later on spoke up about how important it is to teach critical race theory and how important that is in the military. Well, he's our hero of the week because on Capitol Hill this week, he was testifying before a House committee, and he basically put Republican Congresspeople in their place when they questioned him about him talking to his Chinese counterpart last year when Donald Trump was president, because they tried to paint it as though he was rogue, as though he was doing something treasonous. And he basically put them in their place by telling them that this is what is done, and that if they want it, he could show them point by point and line by line exactly what he said and why it needed to be said. And of course, they didn't take him up on that. No surprise there, right? So he's our hero of the week. Our zero of the week are people across this country, crazy MAGA types, I call them, that are anti-vaxxers and anti-maskers who are turning up at school board meetings across the country when school boards across this country, for the safety of the students and the teachers, are making mask mandates. And these insane maniac MAGA type people are coming to these school board meetings yelling and screaming about freedom and about not being forced to wear a mask. That's fine. That's within their rights. You have the right to be an idiot in this country if you want, and they are idiots. But where they cross the line and why they are the zero of the week is that, and we've seen this ever since their hero was elected president and continues to perpetuate this big lie across the country. They have taken it to the extreme where they have threatened physical and bodily harm to school board members, saying, quote, "I know where you live." School board members having to get police escorts out of school board meetings, trying to turn their cars over and things of that nature. So to you crazy, insane, maniacal, MAGA idiots and clowns that don't want to wear masks, that still don't believe that the COVID-19 and the coronavirus is for real, and that's your right. You can be a fool and an idiot if you want, but you are a zero of the week for threatening the lives of people who are trying to enact policies and programs that promote health and protection for our children and our teachers. I want to thank you so much for listening this week. I want to thank DJ Ism for producing the show today. I want to thank all of you who listen to us via TuneIn and Mixler and Mixcloud, that watch us on YouTube and Facebook Live. But right now that I see that my time is up, thank you very much for your time. And until next Saturday at 4 p.m., shalom in Yeshua's name.
Sounds good to me. That's a whole different Miles Davis though. Travis Mike Harrison.
Who is that?
It says Miles Davis.
Okay,
This is Miles Davis, all blues.
That's a different.
It's just a whole different.
Yeah, he did more than once. So that's
He just did the piano. This must be piano.
Yeah,
And he did trumpet on the one you usually have.
because he was a trumpetist.
I was like, what's so different? It's the piano. It's all the same thing. But you know what? It's kind of cool, to have something different every now and then.
Right.
It's the same. People notice, like, oh, well, he got a little different something.
Yeah. Thank you, man.
It's no problem, man. I tried to literally call.
Who was that? I gotta look at my phone and see who
Oh,
it
there
was
it
that
is.
called me.
It was your parents.
She know I'm on the air. What was
You got your mom.
Yeah, she know I'm on the air.
Mama calls you, she don't care. And that's what make me laugh, man. That's why I was over here trying to laugh because
Where is it at?